Hey Mama, welcome to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gibbs, wife, mama of 3, and doctor of the PhD kind. On this podcast, we talk honestly about high achievement, burnout, and what it looks like to lead well across home, work, and self. So if you're an ambitious mother scholar who's quietly exhausted by the pace you've been keeping and starting to realize that survival isn't the same as success, this podcast is for you. Mrs. Mummy PhD began during my own PhD journey as a wife and mama. Today, as a postdoctoral scholarly mama working across 2 leadership roles, this work has evolved. It's no longer just about finishing the PhD well, it's about creating sustainable ways of learning, leading, and living at any stage of your journey without losing yourself in the process. If you're ready to move from survival to restoration, you're in the right place. Let's begin. These are our journeys of becoming. If you're a high-achieving mama who struggles to say no, not because you don't know how to say no, but because you don't want to let anyone down, this episode is for you. Hey mama, welcome back to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do so you don't miss an episode. Today, I want to talk about boundaries. I don't love talking about boundaries, but I think that boundaries are really a secret sauce. It's really a key to sustainable success because I think when you do not have boundaries, you are more susceptible to living in survival mode and quietly burning out. And so I talk about boundaries not as walls per se, or not as an excuse for not showing up for the work that matters, that has some meaning and significance and is critical to your career journey. Not that you're not going to show up for those things. I think boundaries not as selfishness. So this isn't about being selfish or being withdrawn or being unapproachable or any of those things. I want to talk about boundaries as a form of self-leadership. Because I think if you are an ambitious mama, if you are someone who's committed to the work, if you are someone who is intelligent and capable and caring, you actually care about the work you do. You actually want to make a valuable contribution to your field of practice or your field of research. Then, if you are all of those things, there's also a high likelihood that you are very good at saying yes. I'm going to make that prediction. And I'm also going to make another prediction that if you are all of those things, and you are also very good at saying yes, which you likely are, you are probably very tired because of it. So that is my other prediction. You are probably exhausted and quietly burning out because of being ambitious, being committed, being reliable, being capable, being caring, being good at saying yes. I don't love talking about boundaries, but the reason why I care so much about this topic is because I have been there. I have been the yes person. I have been the ambitious person. I have been the completely committed person. And nothing wrong with any of that. But I have lived the cost of not having boundaries, of not being able to say no to things. And I'm not talking about this in a theoretical sense either. I'm talking about this as a mom of 3, as a wife, as a scholar, as a leader who has learned, and I must say sometimes very slowly and very painfully, that being the yes person can quite easily become a form of self-sacrifice. I think there's a really thin line between being ambitious and goal-driven and a go-getter, and also sacrificing yourself for all of that. And these were, I think for me, seasons where I said yes to things because I felt that it was an expectation that I could handle it. I didn't want to be difficult. I didn't want to cause problems for other people. And I felt, that some of the things that I was saying yes to were really good opportunities for me. And I saw it as that. And so it was very easy to say yes. And a lot of times, yes, those things were true. Quite often they were good opportunities. Quite often, if I said no, it may be perceived as being difficult, or, it may be perceived as, well, why can't Michelle handle that? Like, what's the problem with her doing this? So yes, all those things were probably true, but I think what I couldn't admit to myself at the time and what I couldn't see was that the exhaustion was also true. The burnout was also true. And I think sometimes I find sometimes that it's quite easy to point out, it's like, you need to be careful, have boundaries, say no to things. But, and I've said that, like, I have always been of the perspective and the mindset that we need to protect the asset, we need to protect ourselves. But I think sometimes, I don't know, there's a saying in Barbados that we say sometimes, wolves in sheep clothing. Like, sometimes things are dressed up or presented in a way that it makes it really difficult in practice to say no to that thing. And so I think it's not as easy as it looks, it's not as easy as it seems to avoid falling into that trap of saying yes and being the yes person, even with good intentions. And so for me, there were so many things where I felt like, well, I can't say no to that. And there were so many times you would hear people say, when you're at a certain transitional phase of your career, that's a time to say yes to everything. Say yes to everything. And then you can kind of, refine your interest later and say no later. And I think that kind of advice can be quite difficult sometimes when you've got other responsibilities and other things that you value and you care about. And it's not just your career building, but it's also doing so while navigating all of the other nuances of scholarly motherhood and the life that comes with that. And so it's not so easy for us to say yes to everything, regardless of the phase of our career. We do have other things that take our energy, take our attention, that take our focus, that take our interest. And I think for us to be able to achieve success in a sustainable way, in a way that we can actually continue to perform well at that particular level and be able to sustain that in the longer term, I think we do have to have boundaries, and we do have to get very good at spotting when it's time to say no. And so my own season of quiet burnout, what it taught me was that saying yes it's not just a matter of being busy or filling your diary with commitments and appointments and, just kind of running around like a headless chicken. But saying yes also shapes your life. It really does. It shapes what actually you pour your attention into. And so I think that's why for me, boundaries, there's just so much more to boundaries than just being a productivity tool. And I don't view them as that. I think for me, I view them and I've reframed them into a tool for self-leadership practice, like being able to lead myself well. And so I think it's time that we kind of normalize that reframe, that me having boundaries isn't just about me being productive or me being more efficient or me doing more in less time. It's about me actually intentionally leading myself and my life and shaping that into what I genuinely want it to become. And so if boundaries feel hard for you, it's not because you are less capable than any of the rest of us. It's because you care. It's because you're intelligent. It's because you're capable. It's because you're qualified. It's because you have actually been trained to put other people first. And I think as mums, we are particularly at risk of this. We are socialized to be always available, always accommodating, always adaptable, always the one that's willing to adjust and adapt and accommodate everybody else and put ourselves last. And I think in academic and professional spaces, we are also rewarded for being the reliable one, for being the committed one, for being the ambitious one, for being the flexible one. And so when it comes time to face the reality of that, where somebody's asking for more, internally, we don't ask ourselves, is this the right decision? Can I actually say yes to this? What is saying yes to this going to mean for me? Instead, what we do is we tell ourselves, you should cope. You should manage. Other people do this. This is how you become successful. This is how you win. You don't want to disappoint people. You can't say no. You're going to miss out on these opportunities. And it's this scarcity thinking that if we don't say yes to everything, somehow we are going to lose. We are going to lose our piece of the success pie. And so we say yes. And we take this as we are being responsible, that this is what responsibility looks like. But responsibility without limits, responsibility without boundaries becomes depletion, survival mode, and burnout. That is what that actually becomes. And so this is where, like I said, that quiet burnout begins to creep in. From you just saying yes to everything, doing everything, being the yes person, over functioning, and just having no boundaries. And so for me, boundaries are not just about keeping people out, even though when you think about it, that is not a bad way of thinking about it. I remember hearing someone talking recently about boundaries and walls and fences. And they were saying, like, you know, having walls and fences, I don't know if maybe you've heard this saying before, that good fences make good neighbors. Like having a boundary between yourself and your neighbor, i.e. a fence, a wall, whatever it is, having that space that protects your space allows you to be able to occupy that space and thrive in that space without feeling invaded, without feeling intruded, without feeling that you've got no control over who's coming in and out of that space. And so I think boundaries from that, if you think about it like that, it's actually, yes, it is actually a physical barrier. Yes, it is actually a wall. Yes, it is actually a separation, because that is how you're able to be able to thrive within the confines of that space. And so this person was saying that, you know, if you had a house and your house had, you know, no doors, no windows, let's get ridiculous. Let's imagine the house had no walls. Like literally that doesn't define your space. That would actually be very, very unpleasant to live in that space, like to have no walls, to have no doors, to have no windows. The elements are coming in, strangers are coming in, your things that are within the confines of that space are going out or disappearing. Like you have no control, you have no sense of safety. So I think about boundaries, yes, as a way of protecting my space and protecting my peace and all of that. All those things are true, but I think it goes even deeper than that. I think it goes even one step further. And I think boundaries aren't just about keeping other people out and letting people you want in. But I think it's about leading yourself on purpose, being able to lead yourself with intention so that every yes is actually taking you in the direction you want to go. Every no that you exercise or that you enforce is actually a way of protecting those boundaries. So yes becomes this kind of sense of direction and purpose and intention, and no becomes protection, because those boundaries will decide what or who gets your energy, what or who shapes your days, what your children are actually going to learn about adulthood and growing up and leading themselves, and the kind of success that you are actually modeling for them as well. So this isn't about just becoming rigid and wooden. This is very much about being intentional. And I talked a couple of episodes back about my own experience of that quiet burnout. And that came at a period and a time where I recognized, though I didn't see it in the moment, but I did recognize that I was saying yes to way too much. I was saying yes to everything. And I fell into that trap of, trying to be everything for everyone. And really, I began to neglect myself in the sense of saying yes and having no boundaries. And I think I got to the point where I had no choice but to say, this isn't working. You need to step back from this current routine, this current way of life is not working for you. I just remember feeling this just heaviness at the end of the weekend and thinking, oh my goodness, there's so much on my plate, and how am I going to navigate the week ahead? And being in such a state where I couldn't even effectively plan the week and plan how I was going to navigate all the things I had to do, because there were just too many things to actually navigate. And so as I began to reflect on my own journey of self-leadership, I realized I was living my life by default. I was no longer living a life by design, because I felt like there just wasn't enough space to even catch up with all the things I needed to do. And again, it came down to beginning to say no to things, beginning to step away from things, not just the podcast at that time, but other elements of work, making some changes there, the little changes that really made a huge difference to my own sense of self, my own capacity, and my determination to continue to make the changes I needed to make in order to live the life that I was enjoying before I said yes to all these things. And so I think many of you probably would recognize that same pattern where you reflect on how tired you were, or how the family began to notice that things were a bit different, a bit off, or this kind of quiet resentment that begins to creep in when you yourself know that things need to change. You begin to notice that you are quietly burning out, and you know that you need to make some changes, but you don't. And so the resentment begins to creep in. You know that this is costing you in ways that are quite expensive. And I'm not talking about money here, right? But you begin to learn that this pattern doesn't work and that you need to make some changes. And so if all of that sounds familiar, I want to offer you 3 gentle boundary practices that you can use this week. You can practice them whenever you are feeling this way, whenever you feel like, actually, I think my boundaries are slipping a little bit and I need to kind of tighten things up. And so the first one is the first kind of actionable practice that you can implement in your own journey, and it's definitely worked for me. So I'm sharing this as an offer of an idea that you could try and consider and see if it works for you. And the first thing is boundaries of capacity. So I began to ask myself, what do I realistically have capacity for in this season? Because I think one of the things that we as scholarly mamas, we get tied up sometimes is that capacity is not the same thing as potential. Recently, one of our sons, the eldest one, he's been coming up with a study timetable. And his dad and I were sitting down talking to him about it. And we were saying to him that, there's going to be three different categories of things on your list. There's going to be things on here that you have to do. So you should do them because you have to. There are going to be things on here that you would do them if you had the time, if it was possible and there was enough time, you would do those things. And then there's some things on there that you could do because they're kind of nice to have, but you probably don't have time for those things every day. But they would be nice if you did have time. But yeah, you could use some time towards those things. And so by breaking stuff down, you kind of realize that there are certain things on there that are commitments that you have to honor. There are things that you absolutely have to do, and they are within your capacity to do. But then there's things on there that are just nice to have. They're just potential. They're just, they're just great if there is enough time, if there's enough capacity. They're just kind of like nice to have or nice to do. And I think the reason why we get tied up in this capacity versus potential trap is that we think that just because we can do something, that our lives can actually hold the space for it, that we actually have the capacity to do it. And that is not always the case. Your capacity is determined by several factors. So like your energy, for example, the emotional labor of something that you do, how much sleep you have, how much recovery time you need, how much of your energy is dedicated to care work, caregiving, whether that's for your children or an older parent or something like that. So you've got commitments that demand your energy and determine your capacity. And this is where the self-leadership really, really comes in, where you are actually able to name what you can actually carry in this season. So not in a potentially good week, not in a nice to have kind of week, not in an ideal kind of week, but in the week you are actually living in, the present moment, the present week. What do you realistically have within your capacity in this season to do? And be really honest about that. Don't be kind. Don't be living in potential land. Be honest. Be direct. Be truthful to yourself and say, I don't have capacity to do this. I don't have it within me to be able to do all of the above. I've got 10 things on this list. I've only got capacity for the first 3. The rest are the nice to have things. Yeah, if in an ideal world, you had all the time in the world, all the energy in the world, you would do all those things because that's the kind of people we are. We want to do the most. We want to help everyone. We want to do all the things. But the reality is it does not match your capacity. And we have to be really honest about that. So that was boundaries of capacity. Okay, so the second one is boundaries of values. What does this saying yes to this thing mean that I am saying no to? What is this pulling me away from? Because every yes costs us something. It's either going to cost us our time, it's going to cost our attention, it's going to cost our energy, it's going to cost presence. Every yes costs us something. So this isn't a matter of saying, can I do something? Yeah, like you can, but does it serve what really matters to you in this moment in time? Are you in a stage of your journey, whether that be personally, at home, family life-wise, or whether that's even career-wise, the tasks, the commitments you've got on at work right now? When you are saying yes to this extra thing that you've been asked to do or you've just thought up that you want to do, what does it need for you to say no to be able to say yes to that thing? Because if your values include things like being present with your family, your health, your well-being, or even engaging in meaningful work, and that may be within work or it could be outside of work, but engaging in some meaningful activity, some charitable activity, some service of some kind, then I think when you are saying yes to something else that's been asked of you or some other thing that you potentially don't have the capacity for, it means that you've got to say no to potentially some of these things that you value to be able to say yes to that thing. And so I think boundaries in this moment, boundaries in this case, become more about alignment, aligning with your values than it does about restriction. So when you have those boundaries, when you are able to say no, it means that you're saying no to this thing so that you can say yes to something that matters more. So this isn't about restriction. This isn't about avoiding and withdrawing and not engaging. It's about what am I saying yes to and what am I saying no to based on my value system, based on the things that actually matter to me. And so that's boundaries of values. Okay, and the third and final practice that you could use within the next week is boundaries of identity. I love this one because for me, this is about the journeys of becoming, right? When I say yes to something, who am I actually becoming in the process of saying yes to that thing? So sometimes we say yes because, like I said, we don't want to be the difficult one. We want to kind of set the bar. We want to, show ourselves as being committed. We don't want to not be chosen. We don't want to not be relevant. We don't want to not be seen to be trying. And so for me personally, I ask myself in this moment of saying yes to this thing, am I leading myself by saying yes to this? Or am I proving myself by saying yes to this? And if the answer to that question is, I am just proving myself by saying yes to this, then I need to ask myself, what is actually determining my sense of worth? Is it the exhaustion that's going to come from me saying yes because people are going to see that I'm being really committed and I'm doing a good job and I'm, all those lovely things. But the cost of that is that I'm really, really exhausted. Or am I actually, by saying whether it's yes or no, depending on the question or the activity or the commitment, whatever my answer is, can I say that with confidence that I am actually leading myself? So this is me with leading myself with intention towards a particular opportunity. And there are certain opportunities that deserve that yes, that deserve that self-leadership in that direction toward that thing. Saying yes to that makes sense. But then there are other things that by saying yes to those things, it's really just you wanting to prove that you're worthy of being asked or you're worthy of being seen to be doing this thing. And so I think one of the questions for me, the whole boundaries of identity comes from this place of who am I actually becoming by saying yes to this? Who am I leading myself to become by saying yes to this particular thing? And so when you are faced with any kind of request that isn't extra and your boundaries come into question, I really want you to think about these three things. Boundary of identity, who am I becoming by saying yes or no, depending. Boundaries of values, what is this yes taking me away from? What am I having to sacrifice in order to fulfill that commitment? And boundaries of capacity, what do I actually have the capacity in this season to actually hold, to actually do, to actually complete, to actually, show up for, and being really, really, really honest with ourselves about what having those boundaries is actually worth to us and what can we achieve without self-sacrifice, without burnout, without having to put ourselves in survival mode, without having to do the most, and how can we lead ourselves well in those moments. I think it's so powerful to practice those 3 types of boundaries. So what does all of this mean? Just to kind of sum this up and bring this episode to a close. For me, boundaries are about stewardship. They are about protecting health, well-being, presence, purpose. And for me, having boundaries, as uncomfortable as it is for those of us who are a bit people pleasing sometimes and don't want to disappoint others and don't want to let people down and all of that, I think boundaries are a way of being able to lead ourselves well, being able to shape our lives in a way that we want them to look like, but also to being able to shape our lives with intention and purpose and direction, right? They're not there to shrink your life or to make it feel less important or less relevant or less meaningful. They're there to help you actually live a life that is more meaningful, because you know who you are becoming, you know what your values are, you understand your capacity in the moment, and you're able to have boundaries that protect the asset in all of this. And so when your children are able to see that in you, when your children are able to see you have boundaries and potentially expand your life and the meaning of it and the impact of it by having those boundaries, then, and they're seeing you making those decisions with clarity and intention and purpose, then they're learning subconsciously, they're learning that purpose and impact and success does not have to mean self-sacrifice, does not have to mean that we disappear from the story. What it can mean is that we're showing them real leadership, and real leadership begins with leading ourselves first. And so I hope that this episode has been helpful for you this week. I wanted to leave you with just 3 kind of reflection questions or thoughtful questions when you've got a quiet moment this week to think about. And the first one is, when I'm saying yes to something, am I saying that out of habit or out of, trying to prove myself? Or am I saying it with intention? Am I actually genuinely, I've thought about my capacity, I've thought about my values, I've thought about my identity, who I am becoming, and I am making this decision. I'm saying yes to this opportunity or this activity with intention. The second question is, what does my current lifestyle, current pace of work and pace of life communicate about what is important? And this is a hard one. There are times where I have sat down and I have audited my time and what I'm actually investing that into, or where am I feeling really overstretched? And then I reflect on, what does that actually communicate about what matters to me? I know what matters to me, but is my life and is my routine, is my schedule, is my weekly pattern and pace reflective of that? Is it communicating that? And so I want you to ask yourself that question. What is your current pace reflecting about what matters to you? So if somebody had a little window into your life and they were just observing where your time was going and what your energy was being spent on, would that actually reflect what matters to you? And then the third question is, if you could say a tiny no to one thing this week, what would that allow you to say yes to? Would it allow you to protect something important? Would it allow you to invest in something important? What would that allow you to do? And again, this isn't about big drastic changes. I think this is about taking baby steps, saying no to one or two things, saying no to things that may not feel consequential at the moment, and just seeing what that frees up for you. Does it free up your capacity? Does it free up your energy? Does it remind you of an important value that you had that was buried beneath the pace of everything? You know, who is all of this allowing you to become? Who are you becoming beneath all of this? And so if this is stirring up something for you, I just want you to know that you're not alone in this. I have been there, honestly, and I'm still a work in progress. And there's so many times where I am so tempted to say yes to the next thing. And then I have to remind myself of the risks of doing that, right? And to develop sustainable ways of learning, leading, and living. And I think that begins with leading ourselves well. It begins with leading ourselves first. And again, I don't have all the answers. I am not pretending to have all the answers. I'm sharing this from my own lived experience, and I'm still figuring this out as well. But I know the power of leading myself first. I've lived the benefits of that. I can testify to the benefits of being able to step away for a little bit, slow things right down, and really reflect on what matters, and really reflect on how I have been leading myself. And when I'm able to do that, when I'm able to actually take courageous steps towards better self-leadership, towards honoring my capacity, towards honoring my values, towards focusing on the identity that I want for myself, I am able to see firsthand how transformative self-leadership can be, how transformative that success can be, and how sustainable success is so much more powerful, impactful, enjoyable than quietly burning out, trying to prove yourself, overworking, doing the most, and going nowhere fast. So I hope this week that you're able to take some time, slowly, quietly, gently reflect, journal, write it down if you have to, but reflect on what it means to lead yourself with compassion and with purpose. I hope you found this episode helpful, and until next time, stay well, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening. If something in today's conversation resonated with you, I want you to know this. You don't need to have it all figured out before you take your next step. This work is all about learning to lead yourself first in ways that honor your capacity, your work, your home, and yourself without burning out in the process. If you'd like to continue the conversation beyond the podcast, you're warmly invited to join Scholarly Mamas The Letter, a quiet monthly newsletter for mother scholars who value purpose beyond titles, presence at home, and peace within. You can sign up at scholarlymamas.com. And if you're feeling stuck, stretched, or just not where you want to be, you can book a free 30-minute call to help you gain clarity and explore what support might look like in this season to get from where you are to where you want to be. You can also connect with me on social media at Mrs. Mummy PhD, where I share reflections on ambition, motherhood, sustainable self-leadership, all the things, for high-achieving mamas like yourself. This, mama, is the quiet work of scholarly motherhood, and these are our journeys of becoming.